showing up the way I want. Can I change it now or no?
Yeah, yeah, we're
How do I
we're
change?
live. Hi, everybody. We are live with Inside Scoop with Sue, and Sari is going to change her name, but today we are here with Sari Cooper, and Sari Cooper is a certified sex therapist and founder of Center for Love and Sex. And I'm so excited to be with you here. I did promote this heavily as the thing that no one wants to come to, because it's just such an interesting conversation to talk about sex in general. Like, we have threads of people who are so driven by a scary notion of sex and their kids. And then porn feels like something I should never talk to my kid about. Like, if we put blinders on, it won't happen. And I'm not comfortable with it. And so I don't want to go on a Facebook Live or YouTube Live and listen to people talk about things that make me uncomfortable. So I want to start with the story that all of this makes me uncomfortable also. And I think that when I meet parents who aren't uncomfortable, I'm a little bit in awe of them. So I first want to thank you, Sari, for being the person here who's going to help us all feel a little bit more comfortable with the topic and how we address it with our kids. My first question to you is, how are our kids learning about sex?
So I'm glad we started here, because I think our kids, depending on where they live and what school they go to, are getting a very, I would say, mostly narrow kind of education. So if they're going to a public school, they may be getting the sort of same old talk about using condoms to prevent STIs, how to put on a condom, when kids have, periods, girls have periods, and, how your body changes in middle school and your attraction to certain people. All of that gets covered. As a sex therapist, I know that I ask people their histories as part of my assessment. And that's basically what people remember. That's the takeaway, right? Use a condom, be careful, consent, all of that. What they don't learn is, why is my body feeling certain sensations? What they don't learn is, what are different modes of sexuality that people can practice with one another? um, what I'm watching even on television realistic? So actually what's going on, because kids are getting phones pretty early these days. I would say middle school is when most American, if they have resources, are getting phones, and they have access to the internet. So they're landing on pornography, or what I would call sexually explicit media, at very early ages. I would say the average is 11 or 12, whether they mean to or not. And so the unfortunate thing, and I'm so glad to be here, and I'm so glad you're having this conversation with me, because whether parents want to acknowledge it or not, your kids are getting a very bad education around sexuality and the range of normative sexual interests and desires and practices, through watching pornography, sexually explicit media, materials like that online, because it's not produced as education; it's produced as entertainment.
So I think kids are curious. I think people are curious, right? And now we can satisfy our curiosity so easily. So
Mm-hmm.
out there is this conversation that kids are using porn as a way to fill the gaps, the questions that they aren't getting answered by parents or school. They're using porn to answer those questions. However, what they're getting is not real. And so it's setting up like really unusual expectations right now. Tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about that.
Great. So what they're seeing are people chosen for certain attributes that are either, just God given, just nature given. For instance, for boys, they're looking at sexually explicit media with actors or performers who have larger than average penises. And I can't tell you, this is like even before porn became accessible and so easily watched. Men had young boys a portion of them had anxiety around the size of their penises. There's a lot of articles and books, and I've done this actually when I've given talks to parents about body image. Most people think, oh, it's with girls, and I'm like, no, 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 it's it's with a lot of different bodies, and boys feel, oh my god, a my penis is way too small, I'll never satisfy a partner, and b how do you last that long, right? And we know that they are actors that either are taking some sort of medication, right? PDE5 inhibitors to stay harder longer. They're using editors to cut the thing, so edit it so it looks like they can have sex for an hour nonstop without climaxing. So it just sort of builds up so much anxiety, right? What else are they watching? They're watching female performers or female presenting performers who've had a lot of cosmetic surgery, and not only on their face and their breasts, but also on their genitals, right? There are, genital cosmetic surgery for genitals to make the vulva look, smaller, to trim the labia. So they're getting this sort of vision of even just from the outside, what am I supposed to look like, right? They're also getting a sense that this is a performative experience. And a lot of young people, I see a lot of people in our practice. We have a group practice at Center for Love and Sex. We see a lot of people in their 20s and 30s who feel like they have to perform for their partner. And so what it does is it cuts them off from their whole body and their own internal sense of what is pleasurable to them, not first of all. So that's part of it. And then lastly, they're looking at this setup that some people who might like to play with role play and things like that would be into, but that's not the only thing that people are into. Now, my model is called Sex Esteem for a reason, because I want people to feel more esteem around what they're interested in, to feel more embodied in how they're going to access it, and how are they going to communicate that to a partner, whether it's a casual partner, whether it's a friend they want to become more romantically involved with, or a long-standing partner. And so what kids are seeing is a lack of integration between an emotional connection and erotic connection.
So I'm hearing something that scares me. I don't want my kids to have a sense of a relationship based on what they're watching in porn. And yet it seems like I don't have the skill set to counter that. So can you tell us what do you recommend? And then I'm going to share Justin's comment afterwards. But can you give us some tools? Like, how do we have this conversation, even starting it where our kids aren't running out of the room and we're not turning beet red?
Yeah, I think you could say, listen, I'm aware that there's sexually explicit media that is out there and it's easily viewable. I want you to know that it's not representative of all the different types of sexuality out there. And in fact, it's misrepresentative of a lot of types of sexuality that's out there. And I want you to know that you can ask me anything, and I will give you the answer. If I don't know the answer, I will find it, the one that's accurate, that's scientifically based, because I want you to have a good education. Just like I want you to have a good education in school, I want you to have a good education when it comes to your own sexual pleasure and relationships.
Okay, I'm going to share what Justin put in the comments, because I don't know anything about this. I imagine you do. Our daughter completed an Our Whole Lives course when she was 13, giving her direct, honest, and comprehensive sexuality education. He's worried that she's being surrounded by peers and media that afford narrow and distorted sexual images that will erase that experience. Hopefully she'll be able to hang on to it. Thanks for this much needed talk. Well, first of all, Justin, thanks for bringing that up. Sari, do you know about that program?
It's an amazing program. I'm so glad that you got access to it. And for those of you who are watching who don't know about Our Whole Lives or OWL, it is probably one of the few codified curriculums that a religious institution is offering to their families, and it's through the Episcopal Church. And it's a wonderful program. So good for you that you did that. Now, I don't know how old your daughter is now, but you can tell her that, first of all, I would say to you, Justin, it's not just one curriculum, right? It's not one, a lot of people go, oh, I have to have the talk, No, this is like, and the reason why it's called Our Whole Lives is because we're constantly learning and developing and changing our whole lives. And so you want to be a, uh, a qualified authority that she feels comfortable coming to you. And if you don't, I mean, be honest with yourselves. If you don't feel you can have neutral conversations, and I'll get to that in a minute around neutrality, point out someone who you feel confident in, right? Whether it's an aunt, whether it's a cousin. I want, I always said with my kids, like, if you don't want to talk to me, talk to your cousin. She can give you really good information. She's 10 years older than you. She's open to answering your questions. You know what I mean? So, that's really important because you want them to go to someone you trust to provide them with good education. And so I appreciate the concern that she's going to get caught up in what her peers are doing. But you can say, listen, we've provided you with a really good, strong education. And I know you might, experiment or question it as you go through your teens, but I want you to really go back to the material that you learned to figure out how to integrate it with who you're becoming with these kind of values. The other thing that Our Whole Lives curriculum does, and it's really important as parents to think about this, is it helps parents and kids talk about values. I mean, I'm working with men these days who are really dealing with out of control sexual behavior. That's like one group of men we work with at CLS. And their treatment has to do with their values. And values can be anything from, I'm not going to lie to anybody about or misrepresent my intentions, to I'm only going to have a sexual experience with someone I feel very emotionally close to I'm only going to do a certain kind of sexual experience that doesn't involve penetration, until I feel emotionally ready or close to a person, right? Those are kind of values that parents teach, right? We teach them values about how to treat people. We teach them values about how to conduct themselves in the world. We teach them values around racial equity or diversity, right? We
But
teach them
if we take it more narrowly to, I mean, Justin's way past many of us who are here for advice. So if we take it more narrowly to, I've never had the conversation, or I've done the same kind of talk that the school gives the kids, and I want to up my game.
Mhm.
Where do I go for the resources to do this? And, I don't have to be perfect, but I have to maybe know more than I know.
Right. So there's some great websites. One is called Scarletine, and they provide really good sexuality education to teens, and I would say adults, actually. And they're very honest and open. They also talk about diversity and gender orientation, gender identity and sexual orientation, for those kids who are feeling they know they're not like the majority of their peers. They're not quite sure why. Sometimes they know and sometimes they don't, and they're not sure how to sort of express it. What else? SIECUS is the organization for the federally funded organization. It's SIECUS. Great organization that provides resources. Planned
We'll put the links in the comments after we're done with our conversation, so everyone can have them.
Planned Parenthood, your local Planned Parenthood should have programs that and offerings on their site for people to get educated.
That's great. Okay, so that everyone has a place to start right now. So here's something that I envision happening in many households. You come upon a search that your kid did. Again, inadvertently or on purpose. And our instinct at parents is to go right into the punitive, I can't believe you did this, but I think that's probably not what you would recommend. How do we respond to that moment?
Right. So you started off this talk by saying kids are naturally curious. Yes, so are adults. So when they go on sites that provide that, you can say, you know, it's natural that you would be curious about something that is really around us in every single film and TV show that we watch. Um, I want you to be careful, though, of sometimes when you see something, it's really hard to not see it again, right? So, like for me, I'm very sensitive to like, I can't go see a horror film. I can't even go when I go to see films that feature or watch shows that have a lot of violence, I look away. Why? I'm very sensitive to that stuff and I'll have bad dreams. So you can frame it that way to say, you know, developmentally, there are some things that while you may be naturally curious about might harm you, right? And you don't have the foundation of an education to understand what people are doing. So, for example, there's been a recent research study that shows that people watching pornography, sexually explicit media, are more likely to be involved in a non-consensual, aggressive physical experience than those that don't. And that's a very concerning, you know, outcome. These are young adults, and I think they're young adults and teenagers. I can't remember. I don't have it in front of me. But I think it's really concerning as a parent, right? Because you want to teach them that what they're performing isn't what all people want. And of course, a lot of the sort of aggressive behavior is in heterosexual scenes in which the male person is, you know, being more physical with the female person. And it's not showing them having a discussion ahead of time to negotiate these kinds of boundaries or what kind of sexuality. It just is happening. And so in their minds, they're getting this thing of like, oh, a guy might be getting a, oh, this is what girls want if they're heterosexual, or men want if they're gay. And, you know, girls are thinking like, oh, this is what I need to do in order to be sexually attractive to a male partner. I have to do this thing. I have to perform this way. And so to say to a kid, like, I'm concerned when you watch stuff that you're going to get the really the wrong idea and it might get you into hot water. It's not going to make you a good partner. And I really want you to be a good partner.
I love
Let's
that.
make it positive.
And on the other person's side to also say, don't do anything you're not comfortable with, right? Like you each have options of like not seeing that as the only way and also not doing what you don't want to do.
Right. I think you have to go a little deeper. I think you have to say, and by the way, I see a lot of men who feel coerced into sexual experiences that they're not really interested in this person. You know, heterosexual men go, I really didn't feel like having sex, but I did anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, really? Why? Well, I didn't want to look like a wimp. I felt like, I mean, similar sort of narratives. I felt like I had sort of flirted with her. I kind of changed my mind. I was a little drunk, like all those things. So I think in order to be clear with kids, you have to say, it's not enough to just give consent. It's to have a real sense of what you're up for that night or that day. To say, here's what I'd like to do. Here's what I'm open to doing. Here are my like absolute no's. Here's let's talk about it. And that may seem like, oh, you know, so unsexy to talk like that. But actually, no, that actually can make for a much more relaxed, pleasurable, and of course, safe experience. And I wanted to just get back to values for a minute. We have laws in this country around certainly sex, but we also have laws around driving. And parents are very capable of saying, you can get your permit at this age. When you get your license, you can drive within this like area, but you're not to go on the highway, right? We send those kinds of boundaries around driving all the time. Certainly, like if you're drunk, you're going to call me, right? And no questions asked, because, and I'll come pick you up because I don't want you to get into an accident or put someone else's life in danger. Um, the same is true around values around sexuality. So, for example, like being able to say to a kid, you know, here, here are our values around where, when we think you'd be ready for penetrative sex, right? And call it that, right? Because sex is a very wide umbrella and menu. I always say that to folks, so that making out, that's a type of sexuality. Um, uh, Using hands for manual stimulation, that's another type of sexuality. And so you're teaching them how to articulate what the things on the menu are going to be for them. So you can say to a kid, like, we think that you should wait until you're really in a long-term relationship with someone you really love before you have any sort of penetrative sex. That's our value, right? That's what we expect from you, or that's what we think would be healthy for you. And then they at least have a boundary that you've created for them. They may bounce off of it, they may test it, but at least they know what the value is. If you don't talk about this, they don't know what the value is.
Yeah, and I appreciate the actual words. I think that's helpful for people to be able to have a sentence that they could incorporate into a conversation. So I know you do parent groups. What
Mhm.
what do you find out that parents worry about? And then also, what should they worry about? So they come to you with some worries that you probably think aren't the things they should, and then maybe there are other things that you're thinking you bring up that they should worry about.
Yeah. So I think parents worry about casual sex, sex that doesn't involve emotionality. Um, and they're concerned that their children are mm, somehow being used or manipulated by another person. Um, they're concerned about the performative and beauty standards that kids have had to deal with because of social media,
Mhm.
both male-bodied people and female-bodied people, that there's somehow some standard. And those people who don't fit some very narrow standard of beauty or fitness or good looks feel less than, or feel like they're not capable of attracting someone, so that they'll lower their own values in who they become involved with. So those are some of the concerns that parents have, and I think rightly so.
Mhm.
Um, in addition, I don't know if parents are talking enough about alcohol use or substance use with sexual choices. And so, in the same way as I just spoke about driving, right? Kids have really, I mean, kids are totally on board with having, a designated driver once they have their permit. They get it. Like, that has been drilled home. There's been great public service announcements, but no one has talked to them about, alcohol and the problems that we have found, right, with college and sometimes high school kids, is that alcohol is used to lower their inhibitions, to lower their anxiety, and they're making decisions in an altered state that they may or may not regret later. And so I think it would be really important to say, in the same way you shouldn't drive drunk, you should not be drunk when you're making decisions around what you're interested in and who you want to be with, because you could be really regret what you do. And you can't fully consent, right? Just like you can't fully drive and you can get a DUI when your breathalyzer says, I don't know what the amount is, but the same is true during sexuality. And not to mention the legal ramifications for people who are doing these, activities while drunk and aren't getting full consent or giving full consent.
Okay, here's my last question. You
Mm.
and I talked about this before. Like the industry of porn is always has this like, is it legal? Are people being abused? And you brought up a word, ethical porn. I'd
Mhm.
never heard of that before. Can you tell us what that is? And is that something we should be talking about with our kids?
Yeah. So, the adult entertainment industry has been really controlled by a handful of corporations that are owned by men. Just putting it out there. That's been the adult entertainment industry for years. About 20 years ago, some women, feminists, started their own production companies and they started creating their own sexual explicit media. And so what's come about since then are types of media that you have to pay for in the same way you have to subscribe to HBO or, you know, Prime or whatever. You're subscribing for media that has now been qualified as either ethical or feminist or both. And what that means is the performers are getting a wage that has been agreed to. The performers are not being coerced to do behaviors that they're not comfortable with. The performers are getting tested for STIs. Like there's a kind of a standard that's being expressed and acted upon within that production company, so that you feel more comfortable or at least more you don't feel like you're contributing to a potentially exploitational environment, right? It's sort of like saying, I'm only going to buy coffee from, a trade group that I know the money is ending up in the hands of the people who actually grew the beans, right? And so it is a form of work. We call it sex work. And to be able to educate a kid around thinking about who they're watching, if they're going to watch, um, and how that person is actually being treated or not. Um, I think it's again a values issue.
All right. Well, this has been so interesting. I think you gave parents, me included, some really, really good ways to start this conversation. And Sari Cooper, I really appreciate your help here. And we'll put up the links to any of the resources that Sari suggested, and we'll put a link to our whole lives as well. Thanks everyone for being here with us.
If people want to hear more about sex esteem, by the way, or interested in a group, you can email me at Sari at centerforloveandsex.com. You can go on my site, Center for Love and Sex, and look for the sex esteem page, or you can follow me on Instagram at Sari Cooper Sex Esteem. Thank you so much for
Fantastic.